Let's talk about cars and both some of the inspiring thoughts that you had in establishing it, some of the projects, some of the interdisciplinary collaboration that you've been able to witness there.
Well, the roots of the idea of cars really were laid when I was director of the Institute for Social Research here at the University of Michigan. It was a place that, for a half century, by the time I arrived to be its director, had increasingly become a major national laboratory for empirically based and survey-based, primarily, studies of American social institutions and change in them, institutions like the family, and not just in institutions such as the schools or the Federal Reserve System. And it also was a place that was heavily charged with the stewardship of major longitudinal ongoing studies, panel study of income dynamics, the consumer surveys that produce the economic indicators. Mm-hmm. What it hadn't done, it seemed to me, was to create a mechanism inside itself and on behalf of the social sciences to really serve as an incubator of new ideas, new theories, even bold projects that ultimately could be of the genre of the next panel study of income dynamics, but was more conceived as the interplay between, let's say, the social sciences and the biomedical sciences, behavioral medicine, epidemiology, and so forth. So I proposed to my colleagues at ISR that we establish this kind of innovation center that wouldn't necessarily dance to the same tunes or in the same tempos as projects that were being called for by the NSF or the National Institutes of Health, but rather were bolder in their aspirations to take intellectual risks outside of existing theories where there is a series of empirical work on which you can build for the next fundable study, but rather to leap into that sort of gray area just beyond what current theories or current ways of measuring allow you to handle in an intellectually rigorous way, and to do so with companionship not only with other social scientists of different stripes, economists with sociologists and political scientists and so forth, but also with lawyers and physicians, psychiatrists, even engineers, and even more bold than that, to do so in concourse with practitioners, people who are reflective practitioners, thoughtful people in the everyday world, in professional life, in public affairs, who are grappling with some of the current problems or the lasting, abiding problems of American society or human civilization, like widespread inequality around the world. So the idea here was to jump outside of existing ways of thinking and doing on behalf of social science, but also to form new companions and partners in doing so, so that we're not just starting with academic questions and providing academic answers and understanding, but we're trying to use the practical world as a way of driving that knowledge base, those methodologies forward. In some ways, it's an inspiration out of John Dewey. It's a kind of pragmatism, without being systematically a pragmatist philosophy of growing knowledge.
So I'm wondering how you would describe the knowledge that a practitioner, let's say a lawyer who's dealt with urban conflict, or a school superintendent who's dealt with racial performance gaps, the kind of knowledge that they bring to the table, how does that compare to the knowledge of the PhD-trained sociological investigator?
Some of it has to do with what it's like to open one's school every morning and watch kids come in who are hungry, who don't have control over a very large vocabulary, who have difficulty in staying awake, kids who may be in that school for a third of the school year, but who disappear and turn up in another school for the rest of the school year. There are issues of the everyday reality of being in a school, an everyday reality of being a pupil in, let's say, an urban school system, or an administrator thereof, that surely a well-skilled anthropological team could probably capture over enough time. But what would be captured would be knowledge about what exists. It's not necessarily a capture of what could be tried, what might work with the parents and with the teachers, what might be possible within the matrix of relationships between the school system and a city mayor's office. Those are issues which I think the practitioner brings. It's a practical knowledge, which, not to diminish it in any sense, has its own way of being summarized and theorized about, not necessarily in the terminology or necessarily even in the systematic frameworks of academic knowledge, but it exists. And indeed, one of our projects, which is indeed, as you know, focused on the early school years and the lack of preparation, the extraordinary lack of preparation, even by age 4 or 5, of kids from low-income households and minority neighborhoods. It has been the school administrators, the teachers, the superintendents, the chief superintendents of schools, who are extraordinarily helpful not only in conveying that information, but saying, this is what we really need to know in order for us to do our job better. Tell us what your theories are, but better than that, give us tools we can work with that are driven by theories that have been tested in the real world. And it's that challenge, it seems to me, that is a special one that they bring to the table.
Now, that's really, really interesting.